Hi, I'm Delaney, and this is the story of how a house key and everything it unlocked taught me about boundaries, betrayal, and the quiet strength of choosing peace. I paid for the family home in silence, thinking it was love. They gave it away with applause, thinking I wouldn't speak. But what changed everything wasn't what they took. It was what I finally refused to give. Before we go any further, tell me, have you ever given your heart so quietly that no one remembered it was yours to begin with? If yes, comment number 1. If no, comment number 0. This is a family story you won't want to miss. They sat me at the edge of the catering tent, as if I were just someone who delivered the wine, not the one who bought the venue. The tablecloth fluttered against my knees as the breeze from the ocean teased it up, revealing the metal legs underneath. The salt air should have smelled like summer, like celebration, but all I could catch was the cloying sweetness of overripe peonies and a faint sting of vinegar from the buffet line. Graham placed his hand gently on the small of my back, the kind of touch that asked without words, "You okay?" I offered him a smile I didn't feel, then scanned the crowd. My parents were stationed right up front under the main archway, surrounded by flickering lanterns and ivy-draped columns, beaming like local royalty. Celeste was fussing over Dad's boutonniere, while Mom fluffed the skirt of Tessa's dress. They looked 20 years younger, glowing with a joy I couldn't recall ever being directed at me. My own wedding, 5 years ago, had been polite, neat. Quick smiles, a folded check, and a ride home before the dancing started. I glanced back at our table. 4 chairs, 2 empty. A guy in a floral shirt was talking about crypto, and the woman next to me kept glancing at her phone. They weren't family. They weren't even Tessa's close friends. They were overflowing. A server offered me champagne. I declined. Graham squeezed my hand. "You're still on the escrow account, right?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Technically." "Then it's not a gift." Before I could answer, a tinkling chime rang through the speakers. Celeste stepped forward in her lemon-colored heels and tapped her glass with a fork. "If we could all just gather for a moment?" I sank back in my chair, fingers curling around the linen napkin on my lap. Dad joined her, pulling a folded piece of paper from his inside pocket. "We just wanted to say thank you," he began, "for celebrating our beloved daughter's new chapter." I blinked, unsure if I'd misheard. Daughter, singular. "Watching Tessa grow into the woman she is today," he continued, "has been one of the greatest joys of our lives." Each word hit like a soft slap, measured and public. "She's brought so much light, laughter, and love into our family," Mom added, her voice trembling like she was accepting an Oscar. Someone from the next table whispered, "She looks so proud." "And so," Celeste said, reaching into her clutch, "we wanted to give her and Brian something meaningful to start this journey with." It took a second for my brain to register the envelope, the shiny ribbon, the way Tessa's hands flew to her mouth in surprise. "We're giving them the house," Mom said. "Our family home. It's theirs now." There was a beat, then a rush of gasps, applause, even a few sniffles. Graham froze beside me. My hands clenched in my lap. The house. The one I'd been paying off for 7 years. The one I refinanced twice after Dad's hours got cut and Mom's arthritis flare up. The one with my name still buried somewhere in the paperwork, but never once mentioned in this speech. Tessa burst into tears, hugging our parents like they just handed her a crown. Brian grinned like he'd won the lottery. Maybe he had. I nodded, my mouth stretching into something that might have looked like a smile from a distance. Inside, my chest was hollow, my breath careful. A server passed with miniature crab cakes. I didn't move. "I'm okay," I murmured. "You don't look at it," Graham said. "I said I'm okay." And maybe I believed it, if I said it enough. Dinner passed in soft waves of laughter and clinking silver. Someone toasted the power of sisterhood, and Tessa looked at me as if to include me in the moment. I smiled and looked away. Dessert came, a tiered strawberry cake that looked more like a sculpture than food. I didn't touch it. "I need air," I said quietly. "Want me to come?" Graham asked. I shook my head. "Just 5 minutes." The gravel path crunched beneath my shoes as I wandered past hanging lanterns and tipsy guests snapping Polaroids. I found myself behind the hedges near the side entrance, just out of view. There they were, Tessa and Brian, posing on the porch of the house. My house. The photographer arranged them like a Hallmark cover. "Now, hold up the key together." Brian reached into his pocket. They turned toward the camera, smiling. They held up the brass key like a symbol, like a gift, like it had never passed through my hands at all. I stood under the porch eaves, away from the lights, watching them raise that key like a trophy. That's when something inside me stopped moving. For 7 years, I paid that mortgage like clockwork, repairs, taxes, flood insurance, without asking for recognition. But they didn't just forget. They rewrote the story. The next morning, I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my dress from the night before, staring at the dresser where Graham had placed a folded thank you note. My stomach twisted. I didn't have to open it. I already knew what it said. Still, I did. "Graham Langley and guest, thank you for your generous gift. Your kindness helped make our wedding magical. Love, Tessa and Brian." Not even a line for me. No mention of my name. No recognition of the years of payments, of patching up the roof during hurricane season, or refinancing after Dad's layoff. Just guessed. I dropped the card into the trash without a word and walked to the kitchen. The sunlight through the blinds painted thin stripes across the table. The fridge hummed, the room too still. Graham stood by the sink, watching me in that quiet way of his, as if bracing for a storm that never came. "You don't have to keep defending them," he said gently. I pulled a mug from the cabinet and filled it with water. "They mean well." "Do they?" he asked. The words lodged in my throat, then fell away. I didn't answer. I spent the rest of the day drifting through tasks. Grocery list, laundry, tidying the linen closet. I couldn't stop moving, because if I sat down, it might all land at once. That evening, I pulled out the manila folder, where I kept receipts and emails and maintenance logs. I spread them across the dining table. Each line item, each dollar I sent, each copy of the mortgage payment from the past 7 years. I hadn't realized how thick it had gotten. I'd always saved them, just in case. Maybe this was the case. As I flipped through the printouts, Graham came over and set his laptop beside me. He'd pulled up the county records site. "You want to check the title?" I hesitated, then nodded. He typed in the property address, clicked through a few screens. There it was. The official record, still under Celeste and Warren Parrish. No cosigner, no amendment. And, recorded just a few days ago, a transfer of deed to Tessa Parrish and Brian Holloway. My name wasn't there. It never had been. I leaned back in the chair. "I was the one who paid for the gift," I said quietly. "I just didn't know I was giving it." Neither of us spoke for a while. Later that night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan. The blades turned in slow, deliberate circles, as if measuring time I could never get back. I thought about all the ways I'd tried to justify things. When they gave Tessa a new car for her graduation and handed me a $50 check for mine. When I fixed their porch steps after Dad's back gave out, They thanked the handyman who showed up 3 days later. When I offered to host Christmas, they told me they'd rather do it at Tessa's. It feels more festive there. I kept telling myself it was an oversight. Maybe they were just distracted. But what if it wasn't that? What if I was always the one meant to do the heavy lifting while someone else got the credit? Those thoughts made me fall into deep thought. Are they using me as a tool to pay for things that they consider to be theirs? And what about me? The feeling of sadness and discomfort still haunts me from the party until now. If you sympathize with me, please leave a comment number 9 in the comment section below. Now, let's get to the next development of this story. A text buzzed on my phone. Brittany Yoon, the new intern from the office. Sorry to bother you after hours. Do you think it's okay to speak up if you feel invisible? Or is it better to just wait your turn? I stared at the message. I didn't answer right away. My hands were still resting on that manila folder, the weight of 7 years settling in my chest. At some point, Graham reached over and placed his hand over mine. His warmth didn't fix it, but it held me in place. I didn't reply to Brittany that night, but I knew I would. I wasn't ready to say anything out loud, not yet. But for the first time, I could feel something shifting, like a storm gathering in the far distance. On the title search site, one name stood out: Celeste Parrish. 2 weeks ago, she had requested a title check on Delaney's personal cottage. The knock on my door was too polite for what came next. It was just after 7 on a Sunday evening. I was folding laundry in the living room, the kind of quiet task I took comfort in. Outside, the street lamps had just flickered on. Graham was in the kitchen, reheating leftover pot roast. We were finally settling into that small rhythm again. Quiet, safe. Then came the knock. I opened the door to find my parents standing there. Celeste wore a windbreaker over a pearl blouse, her hair pinned perfectly in place. Warren held a reusable grocery bag that sagged at the bottom. They smiled, too wide for something unannounced. "We thought we'd drop by," my mother chirped. "Didn't want to call and interrupt your weekend." My chest tightened. "What's going on?" "We were in the area," Dad said. "Thought we'd talk over something important." They stepped in without waiting for an answer. Graham caught my eye as they entered, his brow barely raised. He set the pot roast back in the oven and grabbed 2 more plates. Celeste sat down like she belonged there. "Now that Tessa and Brian have the house, your father and I were thinking—" Warren picked up, like passing a well-practiced baton. "We'd like to move into your Bluff Creek cottage." I stared at them. "I'm sorry. What?" "The little house you bought up by the marsh. It's perfect for us," Mom said, her voice sweet as sugar cookies. "Single story, quiet neighborhood, close to church. You want to move into my home?" "Well," she said, with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes, "you barely use it." "You and Graham have this place," Dad added, gesturing around my apartment. "Wouldn't it be more practical?" I felt my jaw tense. "You didn't ask. You decided." "It's not like we're taking it," Celeste insisted. "We just stay there, temporarily." "No," I said, sharper than I intended. "You don't get to make decisions about things that don't belong to you." Dad's mouth twitched. "You're being dramatic." "I'm being honest," I said. The silence that followed felt like an aftershock. Tessa's name hung in the air even before she arrived. Her voice came from the hallway as the elevator dinged. She stepped into my apartment in full gloss, white blazer, blowout hair, perfume that filled the room before she did. "Mom said you were being difficult," she said, glancing at me like I was a math problem with no correct answer. "You came too?" I asked, bewildered. I figured someone should help you see reason, she replied and turned to our parents. Have you explained the plan? I've heard it, I said. It's not a plan. It's a takeover. Tessa dropped her designer purse on my side table. You've always been jealous. You hate when I get attention. My hands clenched. That's not true. Then what's this really about? She asked, eyes flashing. Why does it bother you so much that they gave me something? They didn't give you something, I snapped. They gave away what I paid for. Oh, please, she rolled her eyes. You act like you were some martyr. You chose to help. And you chose to take it, I said. And just like that, the room fell into silence. Again. Tessa's lips curled. You've been bitter since college. That's why they love me more. I don't make them feel guilty for it. My breath caught. And there it was. Raw, unveiled, unapologetic. She screamed across a table set with our mother's best china. They love you more. Graham rose from the couch, but didn't move forward. My hands were shaking. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just stood. If they love you so much, I said, voice even and low, maybe they can live with you. I walked to the door and opened it wide. Nobody moved to stop me. Nobody even flinched. I shut the door behind them. And this time, I didn't look back. They used a key. Not a text. Not a knock. Just a key. I was halfway through a spreadsheet when my phone buzzed with a motion alert from the cottage's security system. At first, I thought it might have been a raccoon or the mail truck turning around in the gravel drive. But when I opened the camera feed, my stomach dropped. There they were, Celeste and Warren on my porch. She had her travel mug, the one with the gold initials. He was holding a plastic bin labeled linens. They moved like they owned the place, like this was just another weekend away. And then I saw it. The door opening. They didn't knock. They didn't text. They unlocked it and walked right in. My hands were already dialing Carolina Watchdog Security. This is Dana. Can you confirm, are Ronald and Vera Parrish authorized to enter the property at 27 Bluff Creek? They are not, I said, calmly but clearly. I want them removed. Immediately. 10 minutes later, Graham and I were on Highway 17, headed south toward the marshes. The sky was pewter gray, low clouds pressing in like an argument waiting to erupt. Neither of us said much. My jaw was tight the whole way. When we pulled up, their car was already parked beneath the pine. I spotted a box from Home Goods, half unpacked, a bag of groceries slumped beside a folding chair. They were on the porch like squatters, not even pretending to hide. My father stood when he saw us, lifting his hand like he expected a hug. There you are, he said with that same easy tone. We figured you'd come around. I didn't answer. I walked past him and toward the sheriff's deputy, already waiting near his cruiser. They don't have permission to be here, I said. We'll begin the process to remove them, he said, nodding. We've informed them already. If you wish to pursue charges, we can proceed. Behind me, I heard Mom set her cup down with a sharp clink. Delaney, she called. What are you doing? I turned slowly. She was staring at me like I was the child again, the one who needed correcting. After everything we've done for you, this is how you treat us? My laugh came out before I could stop it. Short, hollow. Everything you've done for me? We raised you, she said, taking a step forward. We supported you. We gave you values. I met her eyes. You skipped my 21st birthday for Tessa's volleyball game. I paid your property taxes 3 years running. And while you were giving her a brand new car, you sent me a $50 check and a greeting card from the pharmacy. Her mouth twitched. That was a different time. No, I said. It was always the same time. I just kept pretending it wasn't. The deputy looked between us, staying neutral. I'm not pressing charges, I said, but I want them off the property. Today. He nodded again. Standard trespass removal. I'll escort them back to town. My father stepped forward, suddenly looking smaller. Just give us a little time, he said. We thought we could ease into it. That's the problem, I said. You always assume, you never ask. You just take. My mother's voice cracked, her tone rising higher. We're your parents. We did our best. I breathed in, deep and full. You did what made sense for you. She gasped like I'd slapped her. But I didn't flinch. I was too tired to soften the truth anymore. The deputy gestured toward their car. They hesitated, but eventually, they gathered their things, the mug, the bins, the grocery bag, and climbed into the back seat of the cruiser. Graham and I followed behind in silence. We didn't speak until we reached the mini storage lot near the highway. We carried their things into a 10 by 10 unit and left the key in an envelope taped to the inside door. I wrote 2 words on the label. That's enough. By the time we got home, the sky had darkened. I dropped my purse, kicked off my shoes, and walked straight to the drawer, where I kept my documents. Mortgage agreements, repair invoices, payment confirmations. I spread them out on the table, like evidence, like truth. One by one, I sorted them into folders. The power bills, the roofing contractor's handwritten quote, the appliance receipt from the year the fridge died in July. I pulled the last page from the folder. The title agreement from 2017. My signature, my down payment, my loan. I had paid for everything, except peace. Peace, it turned out, had a cost, and mine came due in the form of a Facebook post. I was pouring coffee the next morning when my phone buzzed, 3 times in rapid succession. I picked it up, expecting work updates or maybe a message from Graham. Instead, it was a text from a neighbor I hadn't spoken to since 2019. Saw what your mom posted. Are you okay? Followed by a screenshot. There they were. My parents, sitting on the porch of Bluff Creek Cottage, looking weary and pitiful, surrounded by their belongings like stranded travelers. The caption read, In our golden years, we've been cast out by our own daughter. All we ever did was love her. Below it, hundreds of comments. She kicked them out? Ungrateful generation. Heartless. Just heartless. My breath caught as I scrolled. There was a photo of the sheriff's car, another of the cottage in soft evening light, with the implication that I had thrown 2 elderly people into the cold without cause. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink, but my fingers curled tight around the ceramic mug until it threatened to crack. Later that afternoon, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in over a decade messaged me. Heard you evicted your parents. If that's true, wow! Just wow! Then a coworker. Is everything okay at home? Sorry if I'm overstepping. Even my high school English teacher chimed in. Not the Delaney I remember. No one had called to ask me. No one had said, what happened? Just judgment, assumption. I put my phone face down and stood quietly for a long while, the kitchen fan spinning slowly above me. I wanted to scream, or post my own photos, or maybe just disappear altogether. Instead, I opened the old accordion file I'd kept in the back of my closet. Mortgage receipts, signed loan agreements, tax payments, maintenance logs, all neatly labeled, stamped, and chronological. It took an hour to scan everything, another to organize it. By evening, I had a folder on my desktop titled Truth. I haven't posted it yet. I didn't need to, not then. Instead, I made lentil soup and split a buttered roll with Graham. We sat quietly on the couch, our knees touching, a documentary playing low in the background. But I felt it. Something inside me had shifted. Not broken, not bitter, just clear. The next morning, I received an email from someone I didn't expect. Gregory Bell, our family's old estate attorney. Ms. Parrish, I happened across a public post you were tagged in and thought you should be aware. In 2016, your parents had me begin drafting a deed transfer to place the family home in your name. It was never finalized. In 2018, without informing you, they reassigned the title to another beneficiary. I thought you should know. I stared at the screen. So they had planned to give it to me once, and then changed their minds, quietly, without explanation. Later that day, I logged into the public record system for the county. Just a hunch. There it was, a title search on the Bluff Creek cottage. Requested by Celeste Parrish. 2 weeks before the wedding. My chest tightened. They weren't just hoping I'd offer the cottage. They were preparing to take it, again. I printed out the page and added it to the folder. Then I drafted a simple, calm post. No venom, no names, just the numbers, the timeline, the mortgage, and a final line. For years, I paid in silence. Now I present the math. I didn't hit publish, not yet. I was waiting. That night, Graham walked in holding his phone. You might want to see what Tessa just posted. I took the phone from his hand and scrolled to her newest update. Tessa, on the front porch of the Bluff Creek cottage. My porch. Wearing a chunky knit sweater and holding a mug I knew she had taken from my kitchen. The caption read, Peaceful weekend at the lake house. Grateful for my family. I looked closer. The porch swing I installed. The wild mint by the steps. The faded welcome mat I never had the heart to replace. In the next photo, she and Celeste were laughing on the porch as if they belonged there, as if I had never existed. So I opened my laptop. I clicked post. Truth, I learned, doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it just arrives like thunder, low and certain. Within hours of posting, the ripple turned into a wave. Comments came in from people I hadn't heard from in years. Some offered quiet support, simple words like, I see you, or thank you for speaking up. Others sent private messages, sharing their own stories of being the family workhorse, of being forgotten until needed. My inbox was flooded. No one dared deny the receipts. Not after the screenshots of title transfers. Not after the photo of Tessa's mug on my porch. And especially not after the final edition. A voice memo Graham had recorded 6 months ago. My mother's voice, light and crisp, floating across the speaker. Delaney's always been the workhorse. That's her role. Tessa deserves comfort. She's always had a harder time emotionally. I hadn't remembered that call. But listening to it then, hearing my mother categorize me like a tool, like a function, not a person, it stripped the last layer of softness from the memory. And still, I didn't rage. I just let the truth settle, quietly. The next day, I received a formal letter from Gregory Bell. The cease and desist had been sent, signed, and acknowledged. It laid out specific terms. Celeste and Tessa were to remove all references to the cottage from social media, return all copies of the keys, and refrain from further contact regarding the property. Attached were PDFs, digital records showing that they had accessed the county title inquiry system using my name and personal info without consent. Fraud. Quiet. Strategic. But now it's undeniable. The family group chat exploded by noon. Screenshots, shocked emojis, someone asking if it was all real. Aunt Darlene, if even half of this is true, I don't know what to say. Uncle Ray, Delaney did what she had to do. I'm proud of her. Tessa left the chat shortly after. No message, just disappeared. Celeste posted a vague apology the next morning. Something about family misunderstandings and love being complicated. No names, no ownership. But that evening, a voicemail appeared on my phone. From her. Delaney, I know we've made mistakes. Please, just call me. Let's talk, just us. I didn't save it. I didn't replay it. I deleted it. Without hesitation. Without guilt. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to defend my boundaries. That weekend, I met Graham for lunch at the cafe down the street. The one with the checkered floors and peach pie that always ran out too fast. As I sat waiting, I noticed a girl, maybe 22, sitting near the window with a laptop open, headphones in, mouthing words to herself as she scrolled. She looked like I used to, focused, anxious, trying so hard to do everything right. As she stood to leave, she dropped a folder and her papers spilled out in every direction. Without thinking, I got up and helped her gather them. She thanked me, a little embarrassed. Before she left, I said, "Hey, don't let them tell you that quiet means weak." She blinked, then gave me a tiny smile. Thanks. On Monday, I mailed the keys to the storage unit to my parents. No note, no message, just keys. That afternoon, I walked through Bluff Creek Cottage for the first time in weeks. The air was still faintly scented with lemon oil. The porch swing creaked in the breeze. I dusted the windowsills, folded the spare quilts, and replaced the welcome mat with a new one. This one read, "Peace is earned." A week later, I received a card in the mail. It was from Tessa. No envelope, just folded paper with a single line. "We never thought you'd stand up. Now that you have, we don't know what to do with you." I read it once, then placed it in the same box where I'd stored the original house key, labeled, "Things I Survived." That box wasn't heavy anymore, and neither was I. Some betrayals echo, but some boundaries bring peace. That morning at the cottage, standing alone with sunlight filtering through the kitchen window, I realized I wasn't just defending a house, I was reclaiming my voice. Kindness doesn't mean letting people rewrite your story. It means knowing when silence becomes strength, and when truth is the most compassionate thing you can offer. We often forget that those who seem quiet are often the ones carrying the most. And when they finally speak, it's not to be loud. It's to be whole. If this story reminded you of someone who always gave more than they took, maybe today's the day to say, "I see you, I haven't forgotten." Because sometimes, healing begins the moment someone is no longer expected to stay silent.